Let's talk about Strider Mode. This is my first real venture into playing a solo RPG. I'll explain a little bit about the new rules and how the game works, and then I'll end the video with my thoughts about it. Strider Mode obviously works pretty similar to the regular version of the One Ring, with a few changes. The first will happen right in character creation. Instead of starting with 10 points to spend on skills and combat proficiencies, you start with 15 to help give you a little boost, since you won't be having a company to help you out in your adventures through the wildlands of Middle-earth. As well, you'll get a new distinctive feature, which is Strider. This makes all your skill rolls inspired while journeying. I don't think I've mentioned inspiration before. Normally, if your character spends a point of hope, they can gain 1d6 on a roll. If they are inspired, they gain 2d6 instead, so it can make quite a big difference for you when you really need that roll to succeed. Solo players also start with a fellowship score of 3, plus any bonuses granted by their heroic culture or patron. The other change that will affect your character is the new combat stance that is available, which is the Skirmish stance. This essentially lets you fight in the normal rearward stance to make attacks with a ranged weapon, while also keeping some distance between you and melee opponents. While in this stance, you do lose 1d on your attack rolls. However, any enemies trying to attack you in close quarters also lose 1d. This stance comes with its own combat task called Gain Ground. To do this, a player will make an athletics or scan roll as their main action. On a success, they gain 1d on their next ranged attack, plus an extra 1d for every success icon rolled. If a player wants to escape combat, they can also make an attack roll without losing 1d. On a success, the player deals no damage but is able to escape their enemies. This will come in pretty important when you have no one to watch your back. Councils and fellowship phases work the same as they normally do. Journeys, on the other hand, work a little bit different. Since you don't have multiple people in a company to cover the roles of guide, hunter, scout, and lookout, you'll need to do them all. As the lore master / player, you will roll on the journey events table with a d12, and then depending on the result, roll a d6 on the corresponding table. For example, if you rolled a 5, look for the mishap table. And then, with a d6 result of 2, you must now make an explore roll to find your path again. The bottom of these tables will also include what happens if the roll is failed, such as adding 1 day to the length of the journey and gaining 1 additional point of fatigue. Some results will say noteworthy encounter instead of a simple skill roll. These are situations where it would make more sense to play out a full scene instead of just a single roll, such as meeting an important NPC or a dangerous enemy. Now that we've covered the changes to the core rules, how does playing a solo RPG work? The Strider Mode booklet comes with 2 extra tables that can be used when you would normally ask the lore master a question. The telling table is used for yes or no questions. First, you determine your question, such as, is there anyone I recognize at this inn? Then, set a likelihood of that happening. If the inn is far away from anywhere you've ever been, the chances might be doubtful. After this, you can roll 1d12. Since the chances you set are doubtful, if you rolled an 8 or higher, you would see a familiar face. The lore table is for asking more open-ended questions. You can roll for a single word prompt or make multiple rolls for a prompt phrase. First, you ask a question, then roll a d12 and a d6, and then consult the appropriate table. For example, you might ask, what is the nature of these woods? Since that is a question about the aspect of something, you would make your roll and then take the option from the aspect column. A roll result of 2 and 4 gives us dark. Some results, especially when looking for prompt phrases, can be quite abstract. It is up to you to discern what they mean, or not to use them at all if it doesn't make sense or work for the situation. The last tables to talk about are the fortune tables. When you want a great success or terrible failure to hit even harder, you would use one of these 2 tables. On a roll that produces either a G rune or an I, you can then roll a d12 on the corresponding table. An unexpected ally might appear, or you might find a useful item, or a weapon may break, or an old injury resurface. The fortune tables don't need to be used every time you roll a G rune or an I, but they do add some fun options to a scene. And that pretty much covers all of Strider Mode. There is a table to get some ideas or a random result when playing a Revelation episode if you're using the Eye of Mordor rules, and there are lists of quest ideas for all the patrons from the core rules, but they're pretty straightforward, so I won't go into them here. Before I get into my thoughts, I will mention again that Strider Mode is the first time I have really tried a solo RPG before. I had briefly tried Ironsworn, but didn't give much time and found it to be a lot. I've now played quite a number of sessions with Strider Mode, and I really like it. So much so that I think this is my preferred way to play RPGs. However, I certainly did not feel like that during my first session. I found starting the story really difficult, and I was sticking very closely to the random tables, and it just wasn't very interesting, and I felt pretty stuck. This came about as my character, Alahir, was traveling through the forest around the Blue Mountains. I had the idea that the old paths that elves used would be blocked by a landslide, which was caused by some goblins to stop the elves using it. My scan and explore rolls failed, and nothing fitting came up with the journey events table. Then I realized this isn't how I would run a game for players. I wouldn't ever leave it entirely up to chance. I would have some loose plans in place, and the player's actions would introduce the random elements that make RPGs great. With that in mind, I said that a goblin and a wolf scout would be looking around to see if anyone had come by. This event was going to happen no matter what. I then did an awareness roll to see if Alahir noticed them before they arrived. Once I switched to this mode of playing, things went really well. I had a story with events in mind that should happen to be interesting, and I would use my rolls and some tables to introduce some randomness when it was needed. The Strider Mode book even says to do things this way in a little box on page 10. I had read it, but kind of ignored it. Playing with this mindset, Elahir was able to hide from the scouts and attempted to follow them back to their camp. He was later caught by a group of 4 enemies and did manage to defeat them, however he was left weary, wounded, and poisoned. Unable to get back to Mythland, he found a good place to hide and attempted to recover. The last session I played, I ended with Elahir spotting a dwarf moving around on the mountainside, and I'm really interested to see what happens next. In my review of The One Ring, I said that I wasn't a fan of the rules for journeys, but I think that they make a lot more sense here, since you're going to want a bit more randomness than when playing out a campaign for a group. The expanded tables are also a good addition as well. I'll probably even use them for group play. I'm still using the journey rules a bit differently than intended, but I'm happy with how it's going. One of the hardest parts I found about playing was something I'd mentioned in some earlier videos, and that is that hitting target numbers is really hard. This difficulty is heightened when you don't have any other company members with varying proficiencies to make multiple attempts. I don't know the exact math, but if you only have 1d6 to roll with your feat die, the average result is going to be about 10, which is way lower than your TNs are likely to be. So I found that I was failing a lot of rolls. This can be combated with spending hope, but that's not something you'll want to rely on too much. I also haven't found myself using the lore table too much. I've tried a few times with mixed results as to how applicable things were to the current situation. At one point I was questioning a goblin about what they were doing in the area, and I used the lore table to give me an idea of his response. The result of the table was betray, which I chose to interpret as the goblin saying, "Your kind has been betrayed," before he died. What exactly will that end up being? I'm not totally sure. But that is a fun result, especially since now that Elahir has seen a dwarf, he has to figure out if it is safe to reveal himself, or if the dwarves are the ones who did the betraying. Elahir is in a pretty rough spot already, so this might force him to take a potentially deadly chance. So, what are some reasons why you might want to play Strider Mode? The first thing that comes to mind is just how easy it is to pick up. I've played several times when I just had 20 minutes or so. I printed out Strider Mode and keep it in a binder with a set of dice. It takes no prep, no setup, or scheduling. Another reason is that you can fully control the tone of the game. If you've played RPGs for any length of time, you've probably played with the chaotic neutral types, who do whatever they want and the whole party has to get dragged along behind. With a solo game, if you want it to be silly, it can be, or if you want it to be serious, no one is going to ruin that for you. You can also decide the setting and the types of adventure for yourself. If you want to go back to the first age and fight in the wars against Morgoth, you can, which might be a hard sell if other players aren't familiar with or interested in that time period. I also think even if you're playing in a group, it might be fun to go out on your own adventures in between group play. And finally, this is also a great way to learn the rules, whether you want to be a lore master or just a player. As for reasons you might not like Strider Mode, for all I said a second ago, when playing a solo RPG, you're not building friendships and creating shared experiences, so you are missing out in one sense there. It can also be a lot to run a full game by yourself. However, I found that the rules for the One Ring are already fairly light on rolls that the lore master needs to make. Even when I was in that combat scenario with 4 enemies, it wasn't too much to keep track of. That's all my thoughts for now. I can't say if this is better or worse than any other solo RPGs, but I can say that I fully enjoyed this. Strider Mode is well worth the $5 in my opinion. I hope you found this video helpful. I'm looking to write a few landmark adventures to make a video about in the future, and then I'll upload them to the same drive that the wizards are in, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching!